Hello everyone, my name is Avalon and we are here today to do a level analysis and critique, give a little bit of feedback towards Speed1848 and their level Note 1 You Are Too Blind. The level code and the description will be on the screen now, so let's get into it. Okay, so we get straight into this first room with these two pipes on the screen there as an auto scroll forces you to the right. Now this is really clever because those two pipes, you see them just long enough to be tempted to go for them, but whether you can get them or not is neither here nor there because they don't go anywhere. It's just enough to tease the player into thinking they can make it, whether they can or they can't. The next section here, we've got these two cannons, which are also really clever. They have a P-switch timer to them, or a P-switch button, sorry, off screen, which puts them off. And the left set of cannons, they have a really interesting gimmick underneath them, which just slows down the death. It's very, very good, I think. Then we have this setup here with the saw on the top, obviously, and the fireball below. As the auto scroll pulls you across, it gives you the choice between the two routes, and with how the troll meta is, going through the saw might be the correct thing to do. You wouldn't know. Especially with once you jump up there, the P-switch is triggered. Maybe the star comes down. Who knows? But whilst you're considering this fireball adds onto this track, blocking off the correct path, which is really clever. I really like that. I'd say that in the bottom right here, you could probably have some breeze blocks so that they look breakable, so that the player questions whether they should be going into this door or not. I think that'd just be a nice little addition there. So in the second room, you've got an immediate speed challenge, which is really clever. And then some odd setup going on with munchers that will keep you on your toes. All along below where I'm stood now are various invisible blocks with various spike balls and munchers in them, which if you go underneath and jump, it will block off this door, which is the correct route into the next place. This shiny over here is fantastic because it delays you just enough for the munchers to be brought up, which is really clever. And these two big 10 baggers down the bottom here are also quite clever, but I'll get to that in a little bit. The pokey here in the clown car is a really clever way to force the player to move quickly whilst giving them a good stop point. The first time I played this, I did wonder what these note blocks were doing up here, because you can hit them from the bottom with a bit of momentum. But I'll return to the note box shortly. Now this room is incredible. There is a drawback to that, but the room as itself is incredible. There's arrows everywhere, you're wondering what's going on. Now, everyone's played troll level, we've seen this setup, we knew that those cannons were going to separate. But the reason this level is so brilliant is that actually it uses the auto scroll lock to put Mario in a position that you wouldn't expect him to be in. And suddenly he falls back from the top of the screen, which should be impossible. Now, if you look at the level map, this part is actually in the overworld, so you can see what happens. So it's no major surprise. My biggest issue with the setup is, however, that because it is off-screen, and the way this off-screen ice works, it's hard to know which way Mario is going to go as he returns, which just creates a bit of unnecessary difficulty for a player that is blind. A good way to avoid that would have been having a vertical drop down before bringing the player down. And then, yeah, the on-off switch turns off and you can progress into this pipe. Now, a quick question, do you like to gamble? So, I like this because it sets up a precedent as to what's coming next. Gamble is spelt wrong, however, just putting it out there. And you drop down into this section. Now, this setup suggests that it's random. And a lot of players will recognise this setup as well, which is really clever. Mix that in with the fact that there's an on-off switch adding weight to your choice, and as you drop down, obviously you'll find either your way blocked with a clown cart, or you may find it blocked with a spring, both of which are quite interesting. Luckily, if you get it wrong, you can climb back up, you can use this side path here, which is clever, so it doesn't punish the player for being destroyed by the random situation of the map, which is good. These two doors you'd think are to reset the room and hopefully have better odds when you gamble next, and this is where the brilliance of the room comes in. Because if you look here, you'll actually notice that there are now 2 left-pointing arrows instead of arrows pointing in opposite directions with this clown car up here. And a similar situation here. Now, I'm not sure if this bit down here is actually random or whether the clown car is also on a track, because it always goes the opposite way to the spring. Which suggests to me that it is currently on an on-off track that's forced it to go to the right, whereas the springs on the on-off track forced it to go to the left. As I've tried this room multiple times and couldn't get it to let me through at all, even though looking at it, getting through just means death in all directions anyway. But yeah, as it happens to be a separate room, you've had the code for 2 and 3, which I'll come to in a bit as well here. This section, therefore, is completely different, and you're presented with this interesting setup, which you may recognise from the beginning of the level. So this is one clever way to keep a level with a clear condition. You use knowledge checkpoints instead of actual checkpoints so that you can maintain your clear condition. But one key thing to know about knowledge checkpoints is that they have to be really obvious as to what they are. And it'll only be players that notice this pattern that would know what this checkpoint is before they go down the pipe that has a big arrow over it. Get shown the section, and that's the brilliant part of this. And now they realise that they're stuck. Now these mushrooms, this is a really clever softlock, because the mushrooms both delay the amount of time it takes to die, but they also apply weight to the seesaw. There is, as you can see, a little bit of cheese to it, but on the whole, a fantastic softlock room. Really great softlock room. So now returning to this room, we know that we need to go this bottom way here, but as the munchers come up, it's tough to balance it so that you can get over the muncher and not up onto that semi-solid. Now this room is one of my favourite rooms in the level, to be honest with you. It's very, 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 very clever. There's lots of things going on in this room, so we're going to take it a little bit slower. So we start with this 50 bagger here. Now, obviously, the troll meta has reached a weird stage where you have to consider jumping down there just to see what happens. However, Speed, I feel that if you put in some breakable blocks down there, then you could create that illusion that something more is going to happen there. Maybe if you have them run all the way to that cannon, it would look like there was a door behind the cannon or something. So because there's no incentive to go down there, the player probably won't. Now, just as a design point, I personally think this pipe in the bottom left should be spun around, but it's merely a design point. But back to this 50 bagger, there are so many ways that the level's going to knock you in here anyway. It's very, very clever. Whether it be the spring in this, or the spring that falls down from above, or the hidden blocks on these tracks up here, which are one of my favourite things I think I've ever seen. Really good use of hidden blocks as they drive you into that pit. Other things that drive you into this pit, up here, you have 2 cannons that will push you down, and then that cannon down the bottom there will push you along. All in all, very clever. Now once you've made it over here, you've got a whole new section to look at. So you can progress forward this way, and as you can see on the right of the screen there are some interesting glitches over there. And I strongly advise you go and play this level just to have a look at them, because it is awesome good fun to just mess around with this thump that's doing its thing over there. But for once, the correct answer is to jump into the spike block, which frees you up to go this way. And also look at these coins. You don't want the coins though. You want to wait for the cannon, which hasn't moved this time for some reason, which is a bit odd. I'm not sure what's happened with that, but normally the cannon would have moved across. But it appears to be well and truly stuck. I'm really unsure as to what's happened there, but it's okay because we can take this. Anyway, we're going to skip a small part of the level. There is more to find in that room. If the cannon works correctly, you can progress. However, due to the janky level of the cannon, we're just going to move on to this final point, which I found far too early. From rushing to get over this first lip here into this, I accidentally triggered this point over here. I don't know how I'm supposed to find it, but that's how I found it. And that brings you above these note blocks, which I was talking about earlier, which makes the reason for them clear, because again, with the auto scroll, you manage to lock it so Mario's off the screen, but the note blocks keep an eye on where he is. Now, players aren't going to get this from trial and error. This was a very odd decision, but there's a couple of key inputs and you go through a pipe, which brings you to this room. Now this room is fantastic. So you come down this pipe and you're in a very, very odd room with shinies everywhere. But the second you step off this pipe, it's going to pump out a spring, so you can't go through it anymore. And I think that's just such a clever and simple troll that is just by the player's greed. And that's what makes it such a great troll. It's not you doing it as a level creator, it's the player choosing to go against the arrow that you've placed there. And that's what makes it so brilliant. Finally, this room is an auto-scroll problem, where the auto-scroll isn't fast enough so you can read the text. Did you see the code? Which is great. Now, my favourite bit about this is that the code for the first one is actually in the level title. So the level is called, of course, Note 1, you are too blind. So, number 1, you are too blind. I love it. I think it's really, really clever. The only issue is that, as you can see at the top of the screen there, I can see the skulls. So when I found this by accident, I didn't need the code in order to get to the end, because I can see the skulls on the cannons. The delay here is just frustrating as well, and I don't agree with it. There it is, and that's our Monty Mole. Now, I personally would have preferred that the Monty Mole was killable by the player and not having to use on these power blocks. Also, I feel like you could have incorporated checkpoints using that Monty Mole, but I will get back to that shortly. From there, it's just this final room. This spring I thought had killed me, which is brilliant. I thought it was really funny. And then finally, obviously, it's just the flag. And that is the level. So Speed, I wasn't sure which way to go on your level. There's parts of it that I really want to boo, and there is parts of it that I think are some of the best trolls I've seen ever. Take, for example, the falling blocks in the ice room, pinning the player into that 50 coin, so clever, so brilliant. And then the falling cannons as well that lead into the other cannon pushing you in, again, fantastic. I really think there are some great trolls here. My issue comes with player knowledge. So take, for example, the room with the two cannons that are split apart as you jump to them. It's very confusing for the player to have to work out what's going on. So you either need to find a way to automate that more, which will solve problem 1, so that Mario is moved to the top of screen easier. Alternatively, you can look at putting some sort of tube so that you come vertically down, because I managed to come down at several different angles, which just made the whole thing kind of frustrating because I wasn't in control. So I wasn't killing myself, which is what's fun. I was being killed by your level design, which is not so fun. Additionally, the cannon in that secret room is just not working consistently enough. I don't know what it is. I don't know how the setup looks off screen, but the consistency needs to be repaired on that. It is tragic. Finally, there are a couple of soft lock points that you can get through. However, my biggest issue with the level is the fact that it's a code level. Now, code levels just aren't fun. Like, there's nothing you can say about it, which is why I didn't mind so much that you could see the skulls on the cannon. That being said, if you are going to do a code level, you need to make sure that I can't see the code on screen. I don't know if it's that you ran out of vertical space, maybe, I'm not sure, but the skull of the cannon needs to not be visible for the code breaker. The first time I beat this level, I actually didn't even find the room under the muncher that comes in from that second room. So you definitely don't need the code at all. My final thought on the level would be that the clear condition could be removed. And the way that you do that is, if you were adamant on keeping the code point, you could put a note block outside of the player's reach, with a spike in between it or something that has a key in it, and the Monty Mole drops down and releases the key. It's the same process, it's just as effective, but it means that you can put checkpoints in throughout your levels, which makes that that point of frustration that I was talking about around the cannon far easier. It is really frustrating when I actually went and looked for the code that I couldn't get into that room with the springs on hooks more than twice before becoming frustrated with it, because the level just wouldn't allow me to progress. So that's something you need to rework on there, is that consistency. The gamble room I thought was really good, just get the spelling right and that'll be perfect, but I'm not sure if you actually had used random generators there, but it appeared to be. But that's because I got a little bit confused when I was testing the random generators as to which room I was in. But that twice as a whole is really clever, and I like how it tells you, it gives you that knowledge checkpoint. I think it's a well done knowledge checkpoint, despite my opinion to them being quite negative. So overall, I'm not going to either heart or boo this level. I thought it was really, really, really solid, but it had some really painful weaknesses that prevented it from working correctly. There was no actual issue with the level as such. I quite enjoyed it for the most part. It was just those glitches and those issues that stopped me progressing, that made it more frustrating, not because I was doing the wrong thing and not because you were fooling me, but because the level itself wasn't working. But like I said, so many great trolls, and I really hope that you fix these parts, and if you do, I would love for you to comment the level description of the update, because I definitely want to play through this again. So all that's really left now is to take the world record, and I'll see you next time.